Hey everybody, I'm Cryberry Banana. I saw something that finally annoyed me enough to rant about it on the internet. What could this possibly be? The phrase fair share. If you've ever been in a conversation about taxes, inevitably someone will say something along the lines of, the wealthy need to pay their fair share. I know. You're probably assuming that I'm some right-wing nutjob wanting to protect my wealthy overlords from paying a reasonable amount of taxes. But hear me out. The subjective nature of the term fair share is what annoys me. If it were used consistently in that it somehow quantifies what a person's fair share is based on, some measured return from the government, I would have no problem with it. Unfortunately, nobody does that. Instead, we get people spouting out random tax rates for random tax brackets. Oddly enough, when I see it used, it's usually to say that those other people need to be paying more taxes. I know, someone will point to Warren Buffett, who says that his taxes should be higher, but I haven't seen many examples other than that. Even when it is used to say that the wealthy in our country need to pay a higher marginal tax rate, I find it very questionable. I've heard everything from people saying we need a 90% marginal tax rate on the top income tax bracket to some people saying we need to put huge capital gains tax. As far as I can see, these ideas are based on anything other than the idea that people who make more money need to arbitrarily pay a higher portion of their income to taxes because reasons, I guess. Now, I'm sure someone will try to make the argument that the rich need to pay an arbitrarily high tax rate because they're able to benefit more from the system, since their workers are being subsidized or the infrastructure enabled them to be successful. And that's fine and dandy as an argument, but it still doesn't justify the arbitrary tax rates proposed. Imagine you wrecked into me and I was injured. I'd be justified in suing you for all the damages since it would be your fault, but I would not be justified in suing you for an arbitrary amount of money that isn't even related to any damages that occurred in the accident. Insisting that the rich pay an arbitrarily high tax rate to pay their fair share would be the same as me insisting that you pay more than all the damages because it's only fair because I say so. To further the analogy, I might actually be able to justify the higher amount if I can get actual numbers for potential wages lost or attach a legitimate number to emotional damages. But without justifying the actual numbers, the request is kind of worthless. Likewise, I wouldn't be surprised if a study found that the wealthy on average reap some specific amount of benefits from the government that increases as your income increases. If that were to come about, then it would be a justification for the wealthy's fair share being higher than everybody else's fair share. I'd have no problem with that argument, so ultimately, if you want to insist that we use these rates, that's fine, but don't call it their fair share unless you're able to justify how it is fair. Is that an unreasonable standard? If no studies or proof were provided, would we accept a wealthy person saying that their fair share is only half the effective rate as you, since they provide more jobs, thus more tax revenue? It sounds silly, but that argument would be just as justified as the argument I discussed above. This actually brings me to another aspect that annoys me. Nobody clearly defines what a person's fair share would even be. Like I mentioned before, some people actually try to define it, but for the most part it's just an emotional appeal. How often do you hear politicians say that the wealthy need to pay their fair share, then describe what their fair share is in vague terms? If we look at Hillary Clinton's campaign page, we can see this as a plank. Reform our tax code so the wealthiest pay their fair share. Hillary supports ending the carried interest loophole, enacting the Buffett rule that ensures no millionaire pays a lower effective tax rate than their secretary, and closing tax loopholes and expenditures that benefit the wealthiest taxpayers to pay for her plan to make college affordable and refinance student debt. If we take it at face value, then that's a great way of talking about the wealthy's fair share. We could sum it up as the wealthy's fair share is not paying a lower tax rate than the average middle-class person. The interesting aspect is that she defines a lower limit but leaves the upper limit open for interpretation. So it's not surprising that when she mentions the Buffett rule, she's talking about a policy that will ensure that anyone who makes more than $1 million will have a minimum tax rate of at least 30%. In case you didn't know, that's significantly more than what a secretary would end up paying. If we go by what the IRS says, which was conveniently illustrated by the Washington Post, the lower your income, the lower your tax rate. The entire top 50% only pays a 14.33% income tax. Of course, this graph also illustrates that the ultra-wealthy have a lower tax rate as well. Either way, the point stands that not only does she think that their fair share should at least be the tax rate of the average middle-class worker, but also arbitrarily higher than the rate. Since it was left open for interpretation, there's no reason why the Buffett rule couldn't be set at 40% or 50%. If Clinton would stick to just saying, we need to raise revenue, and I'd rather raise taxes on the wealthy instead of the middle class or poor, then I wouldn't be able to criticize her on this point, since she's not claiming that it would be fair. Instead, she insists on using the term fair share as an emotional appeal. Unless she's holding out on us, there's no logic behind how the tax rates she has proposed are their fair share. She just wants her audience to listen and believe. If you want to raise taxes, that's fine. That's to be expected from time to time. However, if you can't justify how it's a person's fair share, then don't claim that it is. So if you have any comments, leave them below and I'll try to respond back. I'd love to receive feedback on the content and any suggestions. Until next time, good night and good luck.